Nobody in Rome realized the city's drumbeat had permanently changed until the calendar flipped, the headlines cooled, and yet the hum that began on May 15th refused to die down. By mid-June, the souvenir kiosks around Castel San Angelo had swapped out miniature colosseums for tiny resin doves and action figure popes frozen in a bow. Tour guides improvised new patter. On your left, the spot where Hadrian's ashes rest. On your right, the flagstones where power learned to bend. It would have been a footnote, one more Roman anecdote between gelato stops, if not for the aftershocks thudding through continents like a sleeper's heartbeat echoing in a thin-walled apartment. In Manila, a street preacher named Kuya Deo fitted a recycled TV to a rusted tuk-tuk, looping the footage of Pope Leo for anyone caught in traffic beside him. He charged no fare, only a promise to hug the next person they'd argued with. Commuters arrived home stunned, quarrels half dissolved by embarrassment and grace. Local radio tallied a 20% dip in domestic disturbance calls that week, baffling sociologists until a graduate student cross-referenced the data with Kuya Deo's GPS trail. She published her thesis under the butt-kicking title, Humility on Wheels, a qualitative study of mobile mercy in Metro Manila, inadvertently launching a movement of renegade street pastors across Southeast Asia who called themselves the Neil Mobile Brigade. 32 days after the bow, a storm javelined through the Venezuelan coast near Vargas State, leaving villages kneed by mudslides just as Father Luis Toro's parish made final edits on a summer catechism syllabus. Government relief sputtered. Phones failed. The world, distracted by a celebrity divorce, barely noticed until a photo went viral. Luis ankle-deep in slurry, holding mass on the uprooted door of an adobe house, altar linens whipping against gray wind. In his homily, streamed through a single cracked phone battery, he quoted the Pope, "Titles impress hell. Humility moves angels," then added, "and angels don't mind muddy feet." Donations blitzed in from strangers who had never met a Venezuelan outside baseball box scores. Within 72 hours, a convoy of solar generators, water purifiers, and antibiotic kits barreled south from Bogota. When news drones finally reached the valley, they found villagers stringing fairy lights powered by those generators, transforming the disaster camp into a makeshift Eucharistic lantern visible from orbiting satellites. NASA tweeted the image, marking the coordinates as the Valley of Bowed Heads, and schoolchildren worldwide traced the spot on globes like a secret the grown-ups had missed. Inside the Vatican, a different storm brewed. Departments that hummed with bureaucratic precision now hummed with something wilder, less containable. Monsignor Fabrizi, who had managed papal security since the previous pontificate, filed daily memos with red exclamation points warning that Leo's unscheduled wanderings rendered standard protocols operationally untenable. The Pope read each memo, circled the phrase with a fountain pen loop, and scrawled in the margin, "So is grace." Fabrizi, aged a decade inside 3 months, but admitted privately to his sister that retirement felt impossible. How do you walk away when you've tasted a front-row seat to Acts of the Apostles? Season 2. The Pope's health remained an undercurrent of rumor. Observers cataloged signs. A hand trembling slightly during the Angelus. A pallor visible even beneath papal white. A cough that hijacked audio feeds before Vatican technicians hit the mute button. Journalists speculated about Parkinson's or an undisclosed cancer. But Leo brushed off inquiries with jokes. "I'm just preparing for the glorified body upgrade," while quietly instructing aides to triple the charity budget for hospice initiatives. He refused a motorized platform during processions, choosing a slower march that left cameramen frustrated, yet delighted children who could keep pace. "If I have 30 more steps than yesterday," he quipped to a worried Swiss guard, "I will spend them like coins. Best not die rich in unspent steps." Late summer delivered the first official papal document of Leo's reign, an encyclical titled Humilitas in Tempore. The press expected bureaucratic Latin. Instead, the text erupted in street-level English, Spanish idioms, and footnotes quoting punk rock lyrics alongside Augustine. The opening line detonated on social media. Power without kneeling is a castle built on gilt mirrors, magnificent yet blinding its architects. Wall Street analysts scanned for economic directives, theologians mined for doctrinal landmines. But what unsettled everyone was the call to institutional self-bowing, a phrase suggesting that systems, not just individuals, needed to fold at the knees. Universities launched last-minute seminars, pastors scrapped Sunday homilies to quote paragraphs long enough to crash teleprompters, and leadership consultants, smelling rebrand revenue, rushed vanity print editions with embossed covers promising corporate transformation through ecclesial humility. Ironically, corporate clients discovered that mandatory humility workshops clashed with quarterly earnings culture. Several CEOs kneeled for photo ops, but leaked memos revealed they did so on foam pads hidden beneath imported rugs. A meme surfaced, two panels, one of Pope Leo kneeling on cobblestone, the other of a CEO kneeling on memory foam, captioned "Spot the real thing." Elsewhere, the encyclical germinated in soil far from boardrooms. At the Casa di Reclusione di Rebibbia women's prison outside Rome, inmates read passages aloud during rec time. Lucia Alvarez, now employed there as a translator after winning asylum, facilitated a weekly circle where lifers dissected lines like surgical interns examining a beating heart. A convicted bank robber exclaimed, "If the Pope can kneel, I can write my daughter," and dictated her first letter in 11 years. When postal delays threatened the mail-out, Lucia personally cycled 3 neighborhoods to hand the envelope to an express courier, later confessing she had never felt speed so holy. Across the Mediterranean, Tunisian Imam Nabil al-Farhani referenced humilitas in his Friday khutbah, translating key sentences into Arabic and applauding the Pope for reminding the world that Abrahamic siblings share the DNA of surrender. Local media pounced, fearing backlash, but congregants flooded comment sections with heart emojis and prayer hand gifs, drowning cynicism in digital confetti. The Vatican, noticing, quietly sent Arabic copies of the encyclical to every Islamic university that would accept them. Student forums buzzed with cross-faith book clubs, Catholic and Muslim theology majors deconstructing humility over mint tea and espresso via video chat, discovering that philosophical kneeling required no shared floor space. September brought a different tremor. A radical group vowed protest during the Pope's visit to Lisbon for World Youth Day, labeling his humility acts propaganda for a dying institution. Security tightenings ensued. Barricades sprouted like misplaced tree trunks. Yet Leo insisted on riding through streets in an open tram. Just as tension peaked, the Pope stopped the motorcade beside the protest lines, stepped off, and walked toward the angriest banners. Cameras captured a near silence as megaphone yells choked into uncertainty. He asked the leader, a 20-year-old anthropology student named Ines, why she marched. She stammered about institutional hypocrisy, citing childhood abuse scandals. Leo listened, tears puddling, then removed the pectoral cross from around his neck and handed it to her. "Hold me accountable," he said, "not as an institution, but as your brother." The crowd expected a staged reconciliation handshake. Instead, Ines sobbed into the cross while the Pope, unafraid, asked the entire protest to lay hands on him and pray however their conscience led. Atheists whispered impromptu blessings they didn't know they remembered. Agnostics muttered hopes. One Sikh visitor recited a verse from the Guru Granth Sahib. Drone footage of thousands reaching over barriers became the most watched clip on Earth for 48 straight hours. Later, Ines accompanied Leo on stage, still clutching the cross. Her speech, 35 unscripted words about victims' justice, sparked immediate acceleration of a Vatican reparations fund. Behind marble walls, some cardinals seethed that the Pope's impulsivity made governance impossible. Cardinal Villiers compiled a dossier listing fiscal irregularities, unsanctioned visits, and reckless liturgical experimentation. He sought support for a private admonishment. Word leaked. Trendsetters on Catholic Twitter coined hashtag AdmonishMeToo, posting confessions of personal rigidity and pledging to let humiliations become sanctifications. The dossier died in committee. Villiers resigned 2 months later, citing health, though insiders guessed spiritual exhaustion. In an ironic footnote, his resignation letter included the line, "I cannot kneel to a governance style that confuses unfiltered emotion with strategic leadership." The letter leaked. Commenters wrote one-liner responses, "Maybe try kneeling first." By November, Father Luis returned to Rome to preside at the funeral of Monsignor Paolo Donati, the quietly saintly archivist who had sneaked extra ink rations to monks during post-war shortages. The homily, attended by 300 archivists in dusty cassocks, might have remained an internal affair, except Luis said this: "He taught us parchment lasts centuries, but mercy lasts longer." Someone tweeted the phrase. It appeared next morning on tote bags outside Roman bookstores, outselling every Vatican postcard for a week. When Leo heard, he sent Luis a teasing note. "You're officially quotable. Hermano, start ducking the paparazzi." Christmas approached with meteorological peculiarity. Rome experienced its first white December in 74 years. Snow blanketed the dome of St. Peter's like confectioner's sugar on a giant panettone. Leo refused the heated Pope Mobile, choosing a simple umbrella and an old wool coat that once belonged to Cardinal Bergoglio, his mentor, still smelling faintly of Argentine mate. Children pelted him with snowballs, breaching every security manual, and the pontiff retaliated with laugh-soaked handfuls of powder, inadvertently sparking the world's first papal snowball fight. A photographer from La Repubblica caught an image of Leo mid-throw, cassock swirling like a comic book cape. The photo graced magazine covers under variations of the headline "Joy Incarnate." Meanwhile, snow muffled the usual Roman melee. Traffic paused. Strangers pushed cars together. Cafes extended hours, serving cappuccini gratis to homeless people collecting slush in buckets to flush alley alcoves. The city felt like a giant, messy cathedral where everyone, believer or not, became acolyte for a day. New Year's Eve unveiled a secret 3 years in the making. Engineers from Nairobi, Sao Paulo, and Munich, sparked by Humilitas in Tempore, had collaborated on an open-source VR platform called ADSUM, I Am Present, enabling bedridden or geographically isolated faithful to attend Mass through low-cost headsets. At midnight, Leo pressed a single button on a tablet, launching the beta version. Screens worldwide flickered as lonely hearts from tundra outposts and refugee camps loaded into a digital echo of St. Peter's. Instead of high-definition marble, developers rendered pixelated cobblestones, insisting authenticity mattered less than access. The inaugural virtual Mass broke every simultaneous user record for a faith app. The Pope preached inside both the physical basilica and the VR space, his voice doubling like a celestial stereo effect. For the communion of desire, he invited participants to imagine kneeling in whatever humble environment they occupied: hospital beds, trenches, midnight buses. "Remember," he said, "the altar is portable. It travels at the speed of longing." Reports surfaced of a Reddit atheist weeping in a dorm, a Syrian family attending from under a UN tent, and a dying Irish poet whispering the creed through an oxygen mask. January introduced an altogether different angle: economics. Italian agronomists documented a jump in small farm cooperatives naming themselves Thorn and Ring, referencing the Pope's Assisi relic gesture. Their charter? Profit shares capped at 50%, with the remainder funding local food banks. An investigative journalist expected to expose them as tax shelters, but found ledgers clearer than Vatican crystal. The co-ops proved so efficient at reducing regional hunger that the European Parliament invited their teen founder, Giulia Rossi, to lecture on scalable philanthropy. She concluded by kneeling, not to a person, but to a burlap sack of wheat. The room, filled with suits and simultaneous interpreters, spent 6 awkward seconds deciding whether kneeling was metaphorical. Most remained seated, yet those who knelt recounted in later blogs that gravity doubled, a phrase trending by nightfall. March saw the Pope accept an invitation to address the United Nations Climate Action Summit. Instead of the expected moral exhortation, Leo arrived with three companions: a Maasai herder named Lamayan, a Norwegian marine biologist named Solveig, and a 10-year-old Fijian girl named Tale, whose island would disappear to rising seas by 2070. He asked them to speak first, then placed the thorn of a cc on the dais beside a plastic bottle he'd fished out of the Tiber that morning. "Earth is crowned by our consumption," he said, lodging the bottle mouth down onto the thorn until it punctured. Water dripped onto his speech notes, bleeding ink. Delegates sat stunned. Leo continued, "Kings wore crowns of gold. Christ wore thorns. We crown the planet with plastic and then wonder why it bleeds." The metaphor metastasized into headlines, hashtags, and editorial cartoons by lunchtime. Two OPEC nations denounced the theatrics as environmental populism, but renewable energy stocks popped 3% the next day. Behind these macro quakes lay countless micro tremors. In Nairobi's Kibera slum, Sister Jacinta taught teenagers to craft rosaries from recycled earbuds. Each sale funded a local internet hub streaming AdSum. In Reykjavik, a Lutheran pastor and a Catholic priest co-hosted a podcast entitled Kneel Talk, featuring weekly dialogues on vulnerability that inexplicably topped Spotify charts in South Korea. In Chicago, a recovering alcoholic read about the Pope's prison visit and felt dared to confess embezzlement to his employer, who instead of pressing charges offered to sponsor his treatment. The story jumped from human resources whisper to front-page human interest piece, prompting a national hotline for workplace restitution. Yet the tectonics of humility also exposed fault lines. Extremists targeted what they dismissed as the Bao cult, vandalizing churches with graffiti reading "Stand Up" or "Shut Up." In Marseille, two young men hurled stones at a diocesan outreach van distributing food. The driver, an ex-gang member turned seminarian, exited with palms raised. Body cam footage later revealed him telling the attackers, "I won't raise my fists, knees bend easier." Confused, the youths fled, tossing one final rock that shattered a statue of Saint Joseph in the passenger seat. Insurance would have covered it, but the seminarian crowd funded repairs. Donors insisted the crack remain visible, calling it the Scar of Peace. When Archbishop Jean-Paul visited, he blessed the repaired statue, noting that the plaster fracture resembled a kneeling line. Public fascination with Leo intensified beyond healthy levels. Marketing firms repurposed his likeness for oat milk commercials. A fashion house unveiled cassock-inspired trench coats. Motivational speakers peddled seminars on papally powered empathy. The Pope responded by slipping jokes into audiences. "Remember, I do not guarantee weight loss." And once photobombed a billboard shoot advertising sneakers, stepping in a frame to hold up a sign reading "Walk More, Buy Less." Sales dipped, but the brand pivoted, donating unsold stock to refugee camps and filming the Pope's cameo into a commercial about second chances. Critics accused Leo of virtue signaling. Supporters claimed he was judo flipping capitalism. The Economist ran a cover depicting him in martial arts GI with the headline "The Papal Pivot." April erupted with the most dangerous incident yet. During a pastoral visit to the Democratic Republic of Congo, rebel militants threatened to abduct the Pope, hoping to trade him for political leverage. Intelligence agencies scrambled. Leo refused to cancel. On arrival in Goma, he insisted on a public Massachusetts. Mid-homily, security intercepted chatter indicating an imminent attack. The Pope, informed via discreet earpiece, calmly told the congregation, "If anyone plans to seize me, let them know they will find no ransom more valuable than the faith of these people, and that faith is unmovable." He then invited the would-be kidnappers to coffee afterward to discuss their pain. Remarkably, no assault occurred. Sources claim one rebel, touched by the invitation, later defected and sought asylum at a monastery. The story leaked, sparking debates on naivete versus fearless love. Leoneizing headlines clashed with op-eds calling Leo irresponsible. Yet photos of his calm face, sweat glistening in the equatorial heat, plastered subways from Bogota to Beijing, captioned with his own pre-trip words, "Courage is fear that has learned to kneel." Upon returning to Rome, Leo convened an unannounced press conference. Rather than address the failed kidnap, he spotlighted Congolese healthcare workers battling Ebola resurgence. He knelt before Dr. Felicite Kabongo, chief epidemiologist, and kissed her gloved hands. "These are the hands that hold back the darkness," he said. The gesture bypassed policy wonks and drilled straight into public conscience. In 24 hours, a global campaign raised €10 million for field hospitals. Dr. Kabongo used the spotlight to plead for vaccine distribution instead of vanity visits. When shipments arrived weeks later, crates bore stickers reading #hands that hold back darkness. Meanwhile, the anonymous boy once found kneeling in Florence reemerged. Activists spotted him at various refugee camps, always arriving unannounced, helping load food trucks, leaving before dawn. He carried the Pope's crucifix on a string of twine, refusing interviews. Online forums dubbed him the beloved nomad. Amateur sleuths tried tracking him via facial recognition apps. Results were inconclusive, fueling myths. Some claimed he bilocated. Others said he was multiple people. An Italian journalist finally cornered him outside Medina, asking why he fled spotlight. He whispered, "I was given a name. I'd rather give it away than keep it." The journalist published the quote anonymously, respecting the wish. Overnight, #BelovedNomad trended, not as a personality cult, but as a challenge. Do one anonymous kind act, post it without credit, tag it. The tag overflowed with screenshots of canceled debts, meals paid for strangers, forgiveness emails. Algorithms, confused by disinterested generosity, failed to monetize the trend, prompting headlines like "Selflessness breaks the internet's business model." Year 2 melted into year 3 beneath the furnace of global attention. Humility, once novelty, now pressured to institutionalize. Seminari intégrated service kneeling practicum alongside liturgie course. Corporations flirted with kneeling rituals before quarterly strategy meetings. Employees critiqued sincerity, yet HR reported declines in meeting room shouting matches. Sociologists coined the genuflection effect, immediate softening of discourse when one party physically lowers themselves. A London think tank measuring negotiation outcomes in union disputes discovered offers improved by 12% following voluntary kneeling gestures. Detractors argued such postures manipulated emotion, but the data persisted. Lower stature rarely coincided with higher aggression. Towering above all else loomed the 4th May 15th anniversary, for which no one knew what to expect. The Vatican scheduled nothing, fueling panic among pilgrims who booked flights. Rumors swirled that the Pope would resign, publish a second encyclical, or reveal a terminal illness. On the morning itself, the square filled long before sunrise. Vendors sold thermoses labeled Kairos again, though some chose to keep coins in pocket, arguing commercialization cheapened the mystery. At 5:59 a.m. the bells tolled with no Pope in sight. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Murmurs thickened. Camera cruz trended, nervus jocis. Suddenly the jumbotrons flickered to life, not with clergy or choirs, but with a live feed from a nameless hillside somewhere outside Rome. There stood Leo in a simple field, birds vocal behind him, dew sheening his shoes. He greeted viewers with a stanza of Gerard Manley Hopkins. "The world is charged with the grandeur of God." He explained the location, the plot where a young homeless man, who later disappeared, had once called himself unnameable. "He told me others were waiting," Leo said, "and I have come to wait with them." He then sat cross-legged on wet grass, silent. 30 seconds, a minute. In the square, restlessness cooled to hushed wonder. Families sat, priests sat, backpacking tourists sat. 250,000 people on marble mirrored a single old man on grass. The silence lasted 11 minutes, fracturing into birdsong, coughs, and children's squeals. Finally, Leo spoke. "When noise becomes our native tongue, silence feels like exile. But in exile, prophets are born." He invited everyone to listen, to traffic, to breathing, to heartbeat, and pledged that whatever reforms, reparations, or revolutions awaited, they must echo the silence that teaches empathy's grammar. The feed cut. In the square, nobody moved for another full minute, as though sound had been temporarily outlawed. Then a lone voice began chanting the Kyrie. Others joined. A tremor of prayer rose, uncoordinated yet eerily united. Drone microphones recorded the sound spectrum and found the same B-flat frequency from the first anniversary. Scientists updated their spreadsheet. After the broadcast, Vatican officials distributed saplings grown from the rose cutting originally gifted to Father Luis. Pilgrims carried seedlings home, wrapped in bulletins stamped, "Plant this where division has rooted." Social media filled with photos of tiny shoots in conflict zones, corporate lobbies, and family yards once mowed over by bitterness. Months later, a botanist confirmed an anomalously high survival rate for those saplings, attributing it to the rose's rugged genetics, though online commenters insisted faith provided a nutrient yet to be cataloged. Through all of this, the Pope's body waned. He lost weight, breath, nights of sleep. Doctors begged slower pace. Leo answered with a grin. Christ sprinted from the grave. I am just keeping up. Secret emails show him seeking spiritual direction from monastery hermits, asking how to finish well. One hermit, Brother Asher, replied, "A candle yields brightest the moment before it gutters." The sentence thrilled Leo. He shared it with aides, who found it both beautiful and terrifying. October ushered a synod on synodality, an attempt to formalize listening as church governance. The Hall of Synods, frescoed and air-conditioned, vibrated with translation headsets. The Pope entered using a wooden staff carved by Paolo, the ex-inmate freed on parole after decades of model behavior. The staff shaft featured tiny symbols, a dove, a thorn, a ring, and a kneeling figure. Delegates admired craftsmanship until they realized the staff was subtly off balance. One must hold it near its center of gravity, or it leaned awkwardly. Reporters asked why the asymmetry. Paolo, granted a day pass to attend, answered, "Because grace is never evenly distributed. We lean toward whoever needs more." The explanation ricocheted through synodal microphones into 8 languages, eliciting tears from bishops who had spent careers drafting symmetrical documents. On the synod's final night, Leo visited Paolo's halfway house disguised in a borrowed hoodie and ball cap. The two men shared instant noodles in a kitchenette glowing with cheap fluorescent bulbs. Paolo wondered aloud if he could ever forgive himself fully. The Pope responded, "Self-forgiveness is just gratitude dressed in your own clothes." Nobody recorded the conversation. Paolo recounted it later to group therapy, where hardened addicts sobbed into styrofoam cups of lukewarm coffee. Winter returned. Snow did not. Rome felt strangely naked under cloudless nights. The Pope, against doctors' orders, resumed long walks through Trastevere, blessing street musicians who set his words to reggae beats. A YouTuber captured Leo dancing awkwardly to a trumpet accordion duo, the clip garnering 50 million views and birthing the hashtag #GroovingPontiff. Some deemed it undignified. Others found permission to celebrate holiness as heartfelt clumsiness. Holy Week approached, and Vatican watchers braced for spectacle. Palm Sunday Mass unfolded solemnly. Spy Wednesday brought an unscheduled foot washing at a women's shelter. On Good Friday, the Pope processed through the Colosseum, carrying not a grand crucifix, but the thorn on a velvet pillow. Halfway around the ancient arena, he knelt, placed the thorn against the stone, and whispered inaudible words. Seismographs across Rome registered a micro-tremor at that moment, imperceptible to tourists yet noted by geologists. Some speculated passing trams. Believers logged it in diaries of wonder. Easter morning dawned lavender and gold. The Pope, pallid but radiant, began the Urbi et Orbi blessing with an unusual preface. If the tomb is empty, let institutions fear emptiness no longer. Mid-blessing, he coughed a long, rattling cough. Paramedics twitched. Leo waved them off, completed the prayer, and added, "Should my voice falter, borrow yours." He blessed the city and the world, arms shaking. As he turned to leave, he paused, faced the crowd one more time, and executed the smallest of bows, a dip of the head, barely noticeable, yet enough to detonate applause that roared like a resurrected lion through the piazza. That night, pyrotechnicians lit up Roman skies with fireworks depicting doves, thorns, and rings. Children squealed as the shapes flared overhead. In Caracas, Father Luis planted the final rose cutting in the courtyard of a newly opened clinic funded by donations, sparked by the Valley of Bowed Heads miracle. Patients wheeled 4 poles outside to watch a live stream of Rome's fireworks, cheering every blossom of color. Luis strummed his quattro, leading them in a hymn older than independence. In Naples, Elena Rossi danced barefoot by the sea with neighbors who once pitted her wheelchair. She laughed so hard salt spray mixed with tears. In Aleppo, Miriam's rebuilt church held Easter vigil by candlelight, shards of stained glass now mosaicked into a window that scattered dawn into confetti of hope. In a Chicago cubicle, the reformed embezzler left work early to attend a recovery meeting, holding a coffee mug emblazoned larger than cartilage. In Seoul, gamers paused at midnight to join and add some vigil inside the VR Basilica, their avatars kneeling in pixelated dust. Past midnight, the Pope entered his private chapel alone. Observers say candlelight flickered against frescoed angels, making them appear to dance. Leo placed the thorn, the ring, and Paolo's staff before the tabernacle. He prayed aloud. I try to spend every step. If currency remains, teach me generosity in dying. Chapel cameras caught him wincing, clutching his chest. He whispered, not my pain, but your people's healing, then lowered himself onto the cool marble floor. Not in collapse, but deliberate prostration. The feed ended there, screen fading to static per protocol. But the next morning he emerged from morning mass, slower yet smiling, telling worried aides, the candle still has a bit of wick. Months have passed since that dawn, and historians have already begun chiseling epigraphs, though the final chapter is unwritten. What will remain? Perhaps only stories passed like heirloom seeds, of a pope who bowed, a priest who trembled, a dove that landed, and a world that for once knelt long enough to feel the earth's heartbeat sinking with heaven's drum. Maybe future generations will trek to a remote hillside outside Rome, sit in silence, and wonder why the grass feels electric beneath them. Maybe they will not know the names. Maybe names are overrated. Perhaps all they need is the echo of a single question once whispered by an 8-year-old boy. Why is the Pope bowing? And the answer tattooed on time. Because in a kingdom upside down, the deepest news is kneeling, and the shortest distance between strangers is the length of a spine that bends. If those future pilgrims ask for coordinates, guidebooks will cite latitude and longitude, but the wiser will simply say, follow the frequency of B-flat humming under your ribs. For wherever humility kneels, eternity stands tall, and the earth, still holding its breath from that morning long ago, may finally dare to exhale.